What's up, everybody? Back here for another World Cup preview. Our second one after Ecuador. Going alphabetically, the second team in Group A is the Netherlands, also known as the best nation to have never won a World Cup. Runners up in 1974, 1978, and 2010. And in a really interesting spot heading into this World Cup, coming off of a really disappointing series of international major competition showings or lack thereof, and also just the time frame and sort of the window this team is in. We'll get to that more at the end. Netherlands got here topping a qualifying group including Turkey, Norway, Montenegro, Latvia, and Gibraltar. Turkey and Norway, two decent opponents, so this was not the most forgiving UEFA qualification group of all time. Certainly, you expect the Netherlands to top this group, which is what they did. They lost on the road to Turkey to start qualifying, didn't lose again the rest of the way. Were very consistent, and so here they are. Your key players. First and foremost, Virgil van Dijk. I know that's real bold to say the best center back in the world is a key player. But when I talked about window and sort of the way the timing has worked out for this team, Van Dijk is a large part of that. Because he wasn't a factor in the 2014 World Cup, wasn't on the team, hadn't really come onto the scene yet. They failed to qualify for the 2016 Euros, failed to qualify for the 2018 World Cup, and he was still recovering from the torn ACL for last summer's Euros. So he has not played in a major tournament for the Netherlands. Having Virgil van Dijk, and that defense is very good without him when you've got Stefan de Vrij, Matthias de Ligt. That is an incredible trio of center backs. But of course, you just can't replace Van Dijk. And so having him healthy, theoretically, fingers crossed for this tournament, is a massive, massive deal. And then the other two players I want to highlight, Memphis Depay, scored 12 goals in 10 qualifiers. That's as many as he scored for Barcelona in La Liga this season. Club-wise, it didn't go great. He may or may not be part of Barcelona's future. We'll have to see how this transfer window plays out. But you put him in his country's shirt, he's been excellent. And for a team that doesn't have an out-and-out number 9, that is a consistent presence you can rely upon, he is absolutely vital. He is the creative force and the person putting the ball in the back of the net for the most part. He's got some help creatively from midfield, which we'll get to in a second, but he is easily the most valuable player in this team's attack, the most accomplished at the club level with what he's been able to do in his career. Yes, the big moves haven't really worked out, but he was terrific in qualifying and always seems to show up in a big way for his country. Did so at the Euros too. So there are enough goals thanks to him in this team. The question is sort of where do you get him outside of him and what combination of attacking players end up surrounding him when we get to the World Cup. Our third key player, Frankie de Jong, again, not exactly perfect at Barcelona, future uncertain. But it's not like his time at Barcelona has been a total failure. You look at some of his advanced numbers, they were fairly impressive. There's a reason he's one of the few players that team actually feels like they can get value for in the transfer market. There's all this talk about Manchester United desperately wanting him and Erik ten Hag wanting to work with him again. That counts for something too. And again, he's one of these guys that it may not, it's not perfect club-wise, but when he puts that national team shirt on, he's been phenomenal. And so the combination of him and Davy Klaassen is vital to the creativity. Can you get some goals from midfield? Now, Klaassen is the one who supplies more of those. But how does this all play in this attacking part of the field and sort of the midfield combination with the forwards. De Jong's going to be a huge part of that. He's one of their most technically gifted players, if not the most technically gifted player. There's a reason he's at Barcelona. You know, a few years ago, he was as sought after as any young player in the world, which is a nice transition into the new starlet of the Ajax Academy, who is among the most coveted young players in the world, and our breakout star for this team, Ryan Gravenberch. It appears he is on his way to Bayern, though that has not been made official yet. He just turned 20. He has 72 appearances in the Eredivisie already to his name. And the other part of this for me is the Georginio Wijnaldum XFactor, if you will, or maybe more accurately, question mark. Wijnaldum was not brought in to this June window. Louis van Gaal basically said the national team is not a place for you to figure out what's going on and get back into good form. The national team is the place where you go when you're in good form. And obviously Wijnaldum did not have a good first season at PSG. To the point where he is contemplating whether returning to PSG will cost him a spot on this World Cup roster. Van Gaal also said if he picks it up and starts playing well again, he's right back in. For a team that is this is the first tournament where I really feel like they've transitioned out of that 2014 World Cup team. And to a certain extent, I guess last summer's Euros were that too. But having that guy around who's been there at a World Cup is incredibly valuable, which is why I still think Wijnaldum is going to make this team. Now, why I bring this up in connection to Gravenberch is part of Gravenberch's problem on the national team level has been, how do I get on the field? He's a regular starter for Ajax. He's playing in the Champions League. And playing on a team that's excelling in the Champions League. But you're not messing with the Klaassen, Wijnaldum, De Jong midfield trio. So Gravenberch makes a Euro roster, but he barely gets to play because there isn't a spot for him to play in that midfield. What I could see happening is Wijnaldum is included, assuming Wijnaldum does not go back to being what we associate with him and sort of who we expect him to be. Assuming these struggles continue because he stays at PSG or he just can't get back into a rhythm if he ends up leaving, whatever it might be. What I could see happening is Gravenberch taking that starting spot from him and bringing Wijnaldum off the bench, at least to start the tournament and see how that goes. And that's why I'm comfortable putting Gravenberch as a breakout star, even though there's every chance he's going to be a Bayern Munich player by the time this tournament actually happens. And he has already cemented himself on the club level, without a doubt. This could end up being his first sort of introduction on the world stage with all of the eyes that come with a World Cup. It's not like he's playing, yes, he's playing in the Champions League, but it's not like he's playing in the Premier League or a club that people watch all the time. It's just the reality of being in the Eredivisie if you're Ajax. So I'm hesitant to label him a breakout star because to me he already has had his coming out party at the club level. But we could be talking about him differently, and the larger world could be made very familiar with him by the end of this tournament if it goes the way it very well could for the Netherlands, and if he ends up winning one of those starting spots that he just hasn't been able to get into so far in his very young international career. Here's the bottom line with this team. The 11 players who logged 450 or more minutes in European UEFA qualifying for the World Cup are between the ages of 22 and 32. I already mentioned this is, fingers crossed, Van Dijk finally getting to play in a major tournament. You have a decent amount of experience from that 2014 World Cup team. With guys like Wijnaldum, Depay's played in plenty of huge games for his country. You've got some carryover still. And then you've got this next group of guys who have excelled for Ajax and individually at times, but haven't put it together on the international level. I'm thinking of guys like Frankie de Jong, Matthias de Ligt, Donny van de Beek, those kind of guys. And so this is the opportunity. And the other fascinating part of this is how this has kind of all played out since 2010. You finish runners-up in 2010. You make the semis again in the 2014 World Cup. Then you miss 2 major tournaments in a row. So this group of players finally gets their opportunity at the Euros. They do just fine in the group stage. Then they have that disastrous round of 16 game, and days later, Frank de Boer is fired. Now, it's not like they were great in the group stage, but they were certainly good enough. So, what did you learn from that? Louis van Gaal is back, who obviously has had ridiculous success in this position in his prior stint. Is this the Netherlands team that you never wanted to play in the earlier part of the last decade? Or is this a group of players that for whatever reason is just not going to be able to deliver when the pressure is the highest? This tournament is more or less going to answer that question for me. Because some of these guys are going to have another shot. You know, this isn't the end of Virgil van Dijk's international career. But we're talking about something different when it's 32, 33, not 30. Like I said, all of these guys are in their primes right now. Some of them on the back end of it. You're not going to get a better set of players in terms of where they're at in their careers than this for this generation. So you've got an awful lot on the line here. Because another disappointment, you got to start asking some real questions. Because that would have been 2 failed qualifications and 2 poor showings with no deep runs. And you look at the talent on this team, and yes, some of these guys have had a rough go of it club-wise. Van de Beek, de Jong to a certain extent, Depay to a certain extent. You know, de Ligt hasn't become exactly what you thought he might when he moved to Juventus. That great generation of Ajax players that very, very nearly made it to the Champions League final haven't really translated when they made that step up to the biggest clubs in the world. But there is certainly still plenty of talent here. It's not like they forgot how to play. And so you bring them back into this environment, by and large, they've been very, very good, which makes this one of the most gifted teams in the world. Especially when you sort of look outside the first, 3 or 4. Okay, France, ridiculously talented. England, ridiculously talented. Brazil, ridiculously talented. Belgium's got loads of talent, but it drops off quicker now. This is not their best team that's going to be headed to this World Cup. And so real quickly you get to teams that I'll take the Netherlands talent over. And so the formula is there. It is set up for a deep, deep run. They can absolutely win this thing. To me, anything less than the quarterfinals would be a huge disappointment. After the quarters, you get into anybody can beat anybody on any given day. there's really no shame in losing, unless it's a disastrous performance. And that was a lot of what had to do with the way the Euros ended. But they, if they do what they should win this group, which means they probably should be favored, unless something bizarre happens. They should be favored in that round of 16 game. Then things can get a little more challenging. But I fully expect it's quarterfinals or better. And so they are up there on the teams I am most interested in this World Cup, because there is a lot riding on this from a legacy perspective for this group of players, especially on the back of what the last generation did. Maybe they're not, it's hard to ask a repeat of Robin, Wesley Sneijder, and Robin Van Persie. But that team showed up back-to-back World Cups. Nearly won 2. This team hasn't gone anywhere close. So you had this very dark time, revived themselves, did not go great their first major tournament. They got another chance to sort of turn around and do it all over right again very quickly, which you don't get that often at the international level. So we'll see what happens. But this is big time legacy in a way. I talked about Ecuador, how this is very much building toward a bright future with all of these young players who are key contributors to that qualifying process. Not the case with the Netherlands. So that is your introduction to the Netherlands national team and what to expect from them come